who am I? Okay, so before I read the opening remarks, my name is Marie-Hélène Pereira. I'm a director of programs at Raw Material Company. You see, I feel at home, that's why I didn't even think that I should present myself. It's crazy, but good. Some openly criticize the ideology of negritude and its lack of vision in regards to black emancipation. He also denounced how public cultural institutions failed to serve an entire community and pushed for the creation of artist-led independent spaces and initiatives considered as pockets of resistance. The Laboratoire Agitard paved the way for different generations of artists and citizens who deeply felt they had a role in shaping, reshaping, or building a better society in which art and culture would gain due recognition. One of their key interventions was the way in which they contributed into bringing awareness and understanding of the non-aligned movement in Senegal through their practice. Solidarity has always been an existential component of the collective and remains an essential element of the younger generation that keeps the spirit of the laboratoire alive today. Raw Material Company was born decades later, 2008, when Dhaka's cultural and artistic context was already known for its dynamism, especially with its biennial of contemporary African art that since 1992 has constituted an important platform for visual arts on the African continent. Simultaneously, however, knowledge production around art making had failed to be nurtured. The main intention of RAW was therefore to fill this void by creating a space for deep reflection and criticism around artistic and curatorial practice. Founded in 2008, RAW is a center for art, knowledge, and society that finds its relevance in opening up discourses around art and related practices that are not necessarily understood or given the value they deserve. Our initiative as an art center involves curatorial practice, artistic education, residencies, knowledge production, and the archiving of theory and criticism on art. The program is transdisciplinary and is equally informed by literature, film, architecture and urbanism, politics, fashion, cuisine, and diaspora. RAW has had since its inception a Pan-African vocation nurtured by collaborations and exchange with artists and artist-led initiatives in Africa and beyond. For the last 12 years, through our different programs, we have worked on and developed a commitment to a sense of a place that responds to and shapes our understanding of the role of an institution in creating and sustaining a space for knowledge sharing and critical discourse to serve as first, then a broader context. Our symposium series, Condition Report, for which we are gathered here today in Dhaka, not Dakar, is a moment of reflection that takes place every year and that we conceptualize in order to trigger conversation and exchange on the status of artistic and curatorial practice in Africa. In this way, we are able to explore the parallels that can be drawn across geographical borders and between which we all learn. We began in 2012 with the first edition to reflect on building art institutions in Africa, exploring the type of institution we create and their importance in initiating new paradigms despite the limitations faced when it comes to funding and freedom of movement. Moving further into our practice and mission, we started to look more closely at education and the need to allow for more creative, flexible, and pertinent educational models than those that have dominated since the colonial era. These in order to step out of the streams of thought that have been inherited from Western occupation and influence. That gave birth to the second edition of Condition Report in 2014, this time focusing on artistic education in Africa. It also led to the establishment of RAW Academy, our experimental residential program for education and the circulation of ideas that breaks out of the classical colonial school format and exists in an inherent dialogue with not only its home, the city of Dhaka, but the homes and paths of the fellows and faculty who it gathers. In continuation of the set of themes that we propose for reflection and exchange, We grew more and more concerned by the archiving of the work we do and the writing of our own histories. These concerns led us to be even more meticulous about the references and different forms of representation that we use, all the while knowing that most of them failed to embrace the realities of our practices and living conditions. Condition Report 3, held in 2018 in the Museum of Black Civilizations in Dhaka, thus became a call to practitioners of the African continent to come together and reflect on the writing of art histories in Africa. Condition Report 4. Stepping out of line, art collectives and translocal parallelism is now taking place here in Dhaka. We would like to thank the Samdani Foundation, Jana Campbell Betancourt, and the whole team of DAS for this invitation and for making us step out of our own line in order to extend our condition report reflections beyond the African context. Thank you to the city of Dhaka for welcoming us. Susankalany Bolo Wotwell. Ants come together to find well-being. Beibu Andalak Bay and Akchere. Goats who leave the herd find themselves in the company of couscous. What happens after the seismic movements? Condition Report 4 exists as a forum for addressing practices and forms of production that take the cooperating, non-hierarchical group as a guiding principle. As does 2020 seismic movements invites us to think about the geographically and temporally large-scale shifts that are born from the release of a pressure, CR4 delves into examples of collectivity, both historic and contemporary, to explore the scope of change possible through the ignition of our relationality. Dreams of cooperation are not always fulfilled, and we acknowledge that the same spirit of resistance, survival, or predation that facilitates collective action can wane or backfire, leaving members out of formation. Yet the aesthetic, physical, and social fields of intervention that are the focus and further of collectives merit attention, in particular, given the role they play in the seismic movements that are the focus of DAS 2020. Fundamentally, CR4 is an invitation to think about the we and the forms of our relationships to one another. We will question and map strategies that allow the flock to fly and get the job done, and then to leave formation without injury, in a bid to open up this prescient field of study while learning and practicing how we can live better together. Through different panels, we would like to start by addressing the forms and aesthetics that come into play in different art collective practices, then the ways in which histories of collective practices are written, the creation of new economies and ground for sustainability, the lifespan of the collective. What happens after it ends? Could we consider it still alive while looking at its legacy? Every day, as you just saw this morning, we will start with a performative intervention that will pave the way to our panel discussions. Following the example of our traditional counseling and decision-making structure called the Pench back in Senegal, we will gather at the end of each day to an open space for exchange with the guest speakers and the public. Inspired by our colleague Zoe Butt's March meeting during the last edition of the Sharjah Biennale, we will invite you to follow our daily journey as if you are listening to a music album that builds upon itself, not only to a single track of it. Each page will be moderated by a guest contributor who, together with us, has been listening to our daily music album. We would like to thank all of our guest contributors who responded to our call and agreed to be part of this adventure. Diana Campbell again, Ruxmini, Shazad, Kerkasha, Teresa, Naureen, Tanzila, and Nayet, all the technicians who we saw working day and night for everything to be put into place, our friends and colleagues who contributed to our reflection process, Wasika and our dearest Otobon Kanga for so kindly agreeing to be our translators, each one of you for attending this symposium. Last but not least, my colleague Dulcie, who's sitting here, and I would like to thank the Raw Material Company team, and most especially our founding and artistic director, Koyokuo, for the amazing work she did putting our institution in place and in motion, and allowing it to be taken furthermore by the young and dedicated generation of practitioners that we are. She would have loved to be here with us today, but time has decided otherwise. She sends her love to everybody. Without further ado, I would like to wish a great, great symposium time to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie-Hélène. Hello, everyone. On the program, it says that it's Elizabeth Povinelli's keynote lecture. Now, I am not Elizabeth. I wish. I'm Dulcie. I'm curator of programs at Raw Material Company. Elizabeth really wanted to be here, but she unfortunately couldn't make it. And I know she's devastated about that. But she's put together a video, which is really quite something. So we'll be able to still have her open up the symposium with her expanded thinking. And we invited Elizabeth to give the keynote because she was one of the faculty members during our 5th Raw Academy that was directed by Otobon Kanga. And she spoke to us a lot about ideas of entanglement that really got us thinking a lot more about the impact that our work has, the impact that our being has, and we wanted to start the symposium with this kind of thinking to also get us imagining collectivity on a scale beyond museums, beyond art collectives, but of course we all know the difficult and drastic and catastrophic ecological situation that we're inhabiting here, and so really to take all of that into account as well. And I know that that's a central focus of DAS too this year, so that's just to explain a bit. I'll read Elizabeth's biography now, and then we can put the video on. So, Elizabeth A. Povinelli is an anthropologist and filmmaker. She's the Franz Boas Professor of Anthropology at Columbia University, New York, corresponding fellow of the Australian Academy for the Humanities, and one of the founding members of the Caribbean Film Collective in Australia. Povinelli's writing has focused on developing a critical theory of late liberalism that would support an anthropology of the otherwise. This potential theory has unfolded primarily from within a sustained relationship with Indigenous colleagues in North Australia, and across 5 books, numerous essays, and 6 films with the Caribbean Film Collective. Geontologies, a requiem to late liberalism, was the 2017 recipient of the Lionel Trilling Book Award. Caribbean Films were awarded the 2015 Visible Award and the 2015 Cinema Nova Award Best Short Fiction Film, Melbourne International Film Festival, and have shown internationally, including in the Berlinale, Sydney Biennale, MIF, the Tate Modern, Documenta 14, the Contour Biennale, MoMA PS, and numerous others. So, a force to be reckoned with. Okay, without further ado, I will play the video, and the title of Elizabeth Povinelli's keynote for us is The Entanglements of Existence and Collective Artistic Practice. Thank you for listening. No one look. Yeah, technical difficulties. Sorry.
Today I want to talk about four axioms of existence. Today I want to talk about four axioms of existence that characterize contemporary critical thought. The entanglement of existence, the differential powers to affect this entanglement, the multiplicity of the event and the collapse of the event, and the provincialization and potential harm of Western ontologies and epistemologies that were brewed in the condition of colonialism and imperialism. But I'm not going to begin with those four axioms. I'm going to begin instead with a discussion of biopower as it relates to the concept of geontopower, so as to give the stakes of how we approach these four axioms of existence and the implication of these axioms for how we think politics and aesthetics. Since the 1970s, when Michel Foucault began to present his three famous lectures on biopolitics, beginning with Society Must Be Defended, and in some ways culminating with the birth of biopolitics. The West, and Western critical theory, has grown accustomed to thinking of politics as operating through life, and life as implicated in the governance of society. For Foucault, there were three great orders of governance that defined both the unfolding of a Western form of politics, but also characterized all politics to some degree. So again, we know and have known from the 1970s that for at least Foucault and his followers, sovereignty was defined by the right to take life or let live,
but under international
or
law,
to kill
the three die as spies.
or let live. Whereas disciplinary power was defined by the regularization of life. Life organized and governed on the basis of getting the units to be uniform and substitutional. Over time, that disciplinary power came to be implicated or laminated into what Foucault began to think of as biopower, or a new way of thinking life and regulating society through that thought about life. That is, understanding that all life operated on a curve in which some thrived and some did not, and the role of governance was to increase the curve of life, of livability, of productivity. Once again, we see how capitalism and liberalism organize their powers through a particular concept of life. Life that seeks to expand its powers, its ranges, and its productivity.
Oxygen. How they bond with each other.
Honeybees are important because they pollinate about a third of the food you eat every day, and this relationship of honeybees and man has existed for centuries. Without honeybees moving that pollen, the foods that you and I enjoy don't exist anymore. A long time ago, honeybee colonies were huge, they were robust, they were populous, and now I don't see that anymore, and it's because they're being impacted negatively by lots of different pest predators and diseases. Honeybee health issues now are so complex. No one person, no one company, no one corporation.
We also know it wasn't long before critical theory outside of the West began to critique this Foucauldian history. One name in particular we associate with his critique is Achille Mbembe, and rightfully we turn to his essay, Necropolitics. Read the history of the emergence of biopolitics, both its disciplinary form, that is the regularization of bodies, the ability for one unit to be substituted for another in the great military factory of Fordism. One could see disciplinary power and one could see biopower more robustly in the operations of the British and the Belgium and the French colonizations of Africa. But one could also see that at the heart of biopolitics was a sadistic necropolitics. But what of all the regions of existence that were maimed, destroyed, but neither killed nor murdered, on which both liberalism and capitalism depends? We certainly see the expansion of a politics of personhood around the world. In particular, the movement to bestow personhood, legal personhood, on rivers, on mountains, on Mother Nature herself. We know that these rights are already sunk in a history of a human that, as Sylvia Wynter put it, was the overdetermination of one kind of man, the kind of man who could treat others as nothing but labor extraction machines in the hot, sadistic plantations of the Caribbean. Of a fossil embedded in a rock, body slowly, carefully pulled out of the inert substances that have kept it dormant, but also available to our investigations. The importance of geontopower, that is, the governance of existence by the division of existence into that which can be born, reproduce, and faces death, and that which doesn't, but rather the way in which this division of existence is used to govern people in the long arm and the long history of colonialism and imperialism, and the way in which capitalism has used the same division to create the conditions of toxicity and climate change that are once again differentially affecting communities of color, the poor, indigenous, and subaltern people. In Western imperialism and colonialism, that refusal of a geontological imaginary is used as a justification for the colonization of people. Now, in the beginning, it could be brutal colonization. Say in Australia, the indigenous refusals to agree to this division of existence allowed colonizers to claim that they were living in the Stone Age. And here you just see the metaphoricity of geontopower spilling over. So here are these Stone Age people living in the Stone Age past, and colonialism was justified in large part by rectifying time, getting the right people in the right time. If they were Stone Age people, then their extermination was justified because they were in the wrong time. Later in multiculturalism and liberal recognition, cultural recognition, extermination, physical extermination, was no longer justified. But the treatment of indigenous analytics of existence that did not separate out rocks and rivers and winds and sands from fish and kangaroos and insects and humans were treated as these imaginary spaces that did not hold truth but held difference. And in holding difference but not truth, a hierarchy of Western epistemologies and ontologies were maintained. The West continued to argue that it held truth in its distinctions between the sciences of biology and the sciences of geology, the sciences of life and the evolution of complexity on the great chain of being. What's happening now is that this geontological division, things that have life, that can die, that have the drama of finitude, versus things we can treat any way we want because they don't have any life, they're just inert, so anything we do to them will give them value they did not have. And again, extractive mining is a classic case of this. Two things are happening. One, the division isn't working any longer in the West. It never was agreed to anywhere else, but in the West it's no longer working. And thus you see in Western sciences the emergence of geobiochemistry or biogeochemistry. You see the emergence of climate sciences, in which the attempt is to not divide existence into that which is life and that which isn't, but understand how all these systems are inside and outside of each other. How we breathe dust, and dust breathes us. But not only is this division not working anymore when it comes to climate change, when it comes to the pressing problems of extinction, of overheating, of toxic capitalism, but indeed the division is now revealed to be dangerous to the very spaces that used it to govern others. That is, it is revealed to be dangerous to the existence of the West itself, as the toxic tides that it once was able to contain in other spaces comes to seep and overflow back to its source. It's in the context of the collapse of geontopower, or at least its shaking, that 4 axioms of existence have emerged in critical theory. I'm hoping that you, when you hear what the axioms are, you say, yes, we know that. Because indeed I'm saying that these are axiomatic now. That in at least some spaces of critical theory, critical aesthetic theory, critical political theory, ethics, and etc., these are now the 4 grounds on which we produce thought, art, affect, and politics. So the 4 axioms. The first one is that existence is entangled. The second is that depending on where you are, how you're formed in that entanglement, you have more or less power to affect not only your entanglement, its contours, qualities, powers, but the entanglement as a whole. Third, that the form of the event, and indeed the political event, but the intimate event, etc., but the political event, the form of the political event has multiplied and has collapsed. And fourth, that the epistemologies and ontologies that emerged out of the West in that long history of its own colonial formation, that is, it formed out of its colonial origins, are no longer sufficient, but they are dangerous. Let me say something about these 4 axioms, starting with the first one, the entanglement of existence. The argument is that there are not 2 objects that are then entangled, right? So you don't take this and that and tie them together. Rather, the argument is that what appear to be separate and independent existences are actual just dense regions of an entangled world. That is, it's not simply dialectic, it's materially constituted as such. We now don't think in terms of the big event, but rather we at least also think in terms of all the little small events that often populate the regions of the poor, the brown, the subaltern, the indigenous, in which life doesn't change in a moment, but is always slowly crumbling in the ongoing dispossession of global capital and settler colonialism, in which the event is something that perhaps one aspires to, but is always jumbled in the midst of simple things like you couldn't get your kid to school again. Or maybe you just can't find a place to cook your breakfast or take a morning shower.
Mom Michelle, they've been working. They've been pulling the pipe wrong way. Savvy? What about that stove when I cook on breakfast? Now I'm not working, else he didn't come. There's something funny here.
Someone making money here.
People living in overcrowded conditions.
10, 20 people living in the house.
Why does it happen? I mean, everyone wants to know the obvious.
People really don't give a crap. $30 billion and 500,000 people. There's a lot of fun and games going in there, and we need to sort that out, and we need to find out where the wastage of our funding is.
Forward to the bush, but where I'm gonna go. Forward to the bush, but where I'm gonna go.
Described community under the intervention. It's almost 8 years later and people here say overcrowding is still a real problem for them, along with basic maintenance.
There's something funny here.
People really don't give a crap.
There's someone making money here.
People really don't give a crap.
Forward to the bush, but where I'm gonna go.
Cause someone's making money.
What?
Mommy!
Banking Royal Commission focusing on the exclusion and the exploitation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people.
No one interferes, no one cares. There's someone making money here.
Everything blocked.
Someone's making money here.
What?
Toilet, shower, in block, yeah.
People really don't give a crap.
No one interferes, no one cares. There's someone making money here.
No one fucking cares. No one fucking cares.
Someone's making money here.
What?
Someone's making money here.
Forward to the bush, crush up lies. Leaving behind the crushed up lies.
It's clear, there's something funny here. Someone's making money.
No one fucking cares. No one fucking cares.
Forward to the bush, crush up lies. Leaving behind.
For decades, living conditions in many of the Northern Territory's small, remote Indigenous outstations have been third world.
Forward to the bush, but where I'm gonna go.
No jobs.
Yuma! Kana mother! Any power in my garden, I cook on breakfast and I go boogie.
No power, Bring that power cut.
Come on, I will walk up long way, Yuma.
I think no power with me all day. I go forever, do that let it eat up.
Jamrat na. I give up, Namrat.
No one fucking cares.
I'm not stay land na. I'm not hungry one.
But that firewood.
Yeah, after I might be probably rather go after.
Forward to the bush, but where I'm gonna go.
Where there's no jobs. People really don't give a crap.
No one interferes, no one cares. There's someone making money here. Someone's making money here.
I think something funny here.
It's clear.
This house never been built.
No one fucking cares. No one fucking
stand up.
Someone making money here.
Forward to the bush, but where I'm gonna go. Back to him old style.
One of the things that I've been interested in thinking about these four axioms is how it is we order them. That is, how we move from axiom 1 through 2 to 3 to 4. And why it may be, or whether we do, always seem to begin with axiom 1. That is, an axiom that seems to have an ontological claim, that seems to make an ontological claim. Existence is entangled. And then move to subsequent or consequential ontological claims. That is, because it's entangled and entangled in a certain way, therefore, depending on how and where you're entangled, you have different powers to affect your own entanglement, the qualities and characteristics that are afforded you there. And 3, that the form of the event multiplies and collapses, which leads to the provincialization of Western epistemologies and ontologies. But shouldn't it be the other way around? Or what are the implications? Or shouldn't it be the other way around? Or what might we gain by beginning with axiom 4 and moving backwards into a claim about existence? When we begin with axiom 4, we remember that the political content of all the other axioms flow not from the nature of existence or the nature of ontology, but rather from a history of the modes by which some have governed existence and claimed truth in their divisions of existence and legitimized the maiming, destruction, killing, and murder of forms of existence that didn't seek truth or knowledge, but sought profit and expansion at the expense of others, both of human others and of the more than human world.
Okay, another little round of applause for Elizabeth, even though she's not here with us. Okay, on that note, we're going to break now until the afternoon. So we will be back here at 3 o'clock for the first panel of the symposium, which is Forms of Collectives. On that panel, there's Jatiwangi from Indonesia, there's Laboratoire Agitart from Senegal, and there's Patshala from Bangladesh. And that panel will be moderated by Marina Foukidis. So we look forward to seeing you back here at 3 p.m. Thank you. Just another note before you all leave is that if you have questions that you want to come up in the bench session at the end of the day, there's pieces of paper over there on the table. You're welcome to use them, note your questions down. You can hold on to them, but you can also hand them to myself, Marie-Hélène, or Enayet, who's helping to coordinate the symposium. I think, we have a bit of time, so I think that we can maybe carry on informally. For people who want to stay and keep talking, that's totally fine. Yeah. But it's not going to be like a moderated discussion. But I'd be very happy to carry on talking.